Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'm an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. My name is Jack Kissell. I know. So anyway, George, there's a guy sitting in a bar in New York, and a fella comes in and sits down next to him and says, "Listen, do you mind if I buy you a drink?" He said, "No, of course, that'd be great." He said, "I noticed you have a little dialect. You're not from the old country, are you?" He said, "Of course I am." He said, "No, really? What city?" He said, "I'm from Dublin." He said, "No, I'm from Dublin." He said, "Really? What school did you go to?" He said, "St. Ignatius." He said, "So did I." "What year were you?" He said, "62. He said, "That was my year." And just then another guy came in and walked to the other end of the bar, and the bartender came down and he said, "I'll have the usual, Mike. Anything new?" He said, "Nah, not much. The Murphy twins are drunk again." Congratulations to 9 months and to the birthdays. It's just great. Of that icon of perfection thing, what happens is all of your defects of character disappear after your 25th AA birthday. The only one that I still have is honesty. I can't get honest. But I do congratulate everybody that's been given this gift. And someone mentioned the people who give it back. And I recognize James, who has been active in the committees and working on events, and that's nice. That's what it takes to keep us going, you know. I have a lot of friends who what's today? Today 13 days, 3 months, and 26 years sober. And I have a lot of friends who don't go to meetings much. And I say, "Why? What's the matter with you?" And he said, "Well, I don't really need them anymore." And my answer to that is, okay, let's say you don't need them. Do you owe it? Don't you owe it? And of course, we all need them. There's no way around that. I have a friend who, God, it was sad, just 3 days ago, his wife and he were in an automobile accident, and I just love her. She's a great, tough old Irish Al-Anon named Cecilia, and she got hurt badly, and she was in the hospital, and we just heard about it. They live up in Ventura. So I called him, and I hadn't talked to him in some years. And the last, or the big event when it happened, is he asked me to come up there to speak, just maybe 10 years ago. And he said, "Bring Gene, and you know, Seal and I and you and Gene will go to dinner." And we did up there, and at this Chinese restaurant, I said to him, "Well, now Grant, you're coming up on 33 years. Pretty soon, this month, right?" He said, oh, you didn't hear. No, Jack. When I was 29, I drank. And now he was back. And he had about 3 years at that time. So now I haven't talked to him off and on for a long time. And Seal got hurt, and so I called him, just to see how he was doing. And we talked a little bit, and he talked in AA code in the course of our conversation. He said, I've had some troubles. I know what that means. I didn't ask him, because under the circumstances and stuff, I would normally, but I didn't ask him, how long are you sober? I didn't do that because of the situation, but I said, I'll keep track of you a little bit. And then as we were hanging up, it almost wasn't said to me, this plaintive line that I keep echoing in my head. As I was hanging up, I heard him say, I had 29 years. Oh, man. Oh, it was heartbreaking. But this is a gift. I don't know that you can protect it. I know that full involvement in the program and the principles and the steps tend to make it a little safer, but it is a gift. It is an unearned, undeserved gift, and that's the truth. There are a lot of people who I have buried who deserved it more than me, better people who wanted it more than me. I always say, if I knew I was going to stay sober this long, I would have worked a better program, But people who have been to more meetings than I, people who tried harder and died of the disease. I don't know what the selection process is. Sometimes, people slip, and some of my self-righteous friends will say, well, he just didn't want it. Well, among other things, where did they meet him? In a bar? No, man, in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Anybody who walks into that room wants it, including the court cases. Come on, there has never been an alcoholic dumb enough to not be able to figure out that you can sign those things yourself. You don't need to go to the secretary. It's because they really want to see what's going on here. What do these people do that they don't drink? And so we all who come here want it. And furthermore, how do you get that? How do you get wanting it? It is not a matter of how much you suffered. It's just not. I mean, in a game of can you bottom this, I can usually get about to the semifinals, but it doesn't matter. I have a friend, I always tease her. She's got 25 years. She's just a little behind me. But I think Doreen knows her. Charlotte. Do you know Charlotte? Charlotte in the pink? Well, Charlotte, I always tease her. She did not drink in her lifetime as much as I spilled on a weekend. I mean, really, she never drank very much. And she never got in any trouble. She found in one of the stories something that she could identify with, but I mean, she was 6 or 7 months sober at that time. Somebody in one of the stories, it says that drinking had become an annoyance. My drinking became an annoyance about the first half hour that I ever drank in my life. But what's fascinating to me is that her sobriety has been no easier than mine, has been no different than mine. The struggle with the practices of the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous is just as tough on her as it is on me. It's been no different. The disease is the disease is the disease. And there's nothing that's going to change that. And it operates full bore. And of course I was teasing about the defects of character, Thanea, because the disease, I got bad news for you. the disease doesn't diminish a whit, at least for the first 26 years, 3 months, and 13 days, that I know for sure. Because it operates in me just as vigorously as it ever did. It just really does. I want to offer a quick history lesson. The traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous were adopted in 1955 at the International Convention, and the vote was unanimous, accepting the long form of the traditions. The short form, which we read for convenience, is a synopsis that a Cleveland member gave to Bill just for the purposes of people being able to see what they were voting on. The third tradition, which we adopted, states that the only requirement for membership is a desire to recover from alcoholism. The book doesn't mention sedatives until page 7. And so to insist that somebody should to talk only about their experiences with alcohol deviates just a bit from the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's true. And so that's just a little history lesson. I have had no experiences with alcohol for 26 years, 3 months. I had experiences with alcoholism all day today, Alcohol I haven't had to deal with that for a long damn time. I dealt with alcoholism on my way up here, That's just the way it is. I was fascinated by the experience of leaving the practice of AA and the meetings and so on, staying with the principles, at least, some of them, the spiritual side of it, sort of. I wouldn't last that long. I think it was 4 years, was it? I just wouldn't last that long. I couldn't do that. Because it has become clear to me after the fact. I mean, I didn't learn this going in, but I see it now. The steps are divided into 3 sections, and you referred specifically in that way. And for me, the first section basically deals with the future. The first 3 steps, done sufficiently and deeply and consistently, relieve me of terror of the future, of anxiety about what's going to happen. If I work the first 3 steps rigorously, I will not experience anxiety about what's going to be. And that middle section, the 4 through 10, or through 9 rather, that middle section deals with laying the past to rest. And I have to do that continually. I don't get to do it once. I do like a major excavation once, but then the practice of becoming aware of some ancient guilt or some old resentment, and going through the process of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on a specific, in a broad general and pretty encompassing way, I was able to forgive my father following the fifth step and the sixth and seventh and eighth. I mean, pretty much. It was a very difficult task, I must say. I had this sponsor who was, after I chose him, I realized that he was not equipped to deal with somebody as complex as me. Do you understand? I mean, this guy was a high school dropout, you know? I mean, I graduated from Notre Dame. I did graduate work at Columbia and graduate work at Fordham. I was trained in the Army in psychology. What the hell was this high school dropout going to teach me? You know? And I wanted to get rid of him, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And one of the things that Fred Ellis used to do was teach me what the words meant. God, I hated that. I mean, you know, he said, now you're going to have to give up resentment. I said, okay, I understand. I'll do that. And he said, now let me tell you what the word means. I said, Fred, I know what the word means. And as if I had not even spoken, he said, all right, now, resentment is re-feeling old injury. Well, I'd never quite thought of it like that. Re-feeling old injury was kind of a talent of mine. I mean, if you ever hurt my feelings in the slightest, I mean, if you forgot my name at a party, it went into your file. And I never forgot it. And it was justification later on when I ripped you off in some fashion. So he said, okay, give up. Yeah. He said, now let me give you an example. Your biggest resentment probably is your father. And I said, well, yeah. And he said, okay, so you're going to have to forgive him. I said, no, you don't understand. See, he doesn't deserve it. And he said, it isn't about what he deserves, it's what you need. I said, man, I pried that man's fingers from off of my mother's throat. I wrapped his hand in a towel when he severed an artery, putting it through the kitchen window. When I was 9 years old, I kicked him out of my bed. How the hell do you expect me to forgive that man? And he had this other irritating thing he did. He said to me, I don't know. Pray about it. See, I wasn't praying much in those days. I refused, for example, I refused to use your language. I wouldn't higher power, come on. I wouldn't say any of that. I didn't say God, but I was trying not to drink and to practice these programs, these principles. So I was praying for a while to the close and holy darkness and to an entity I referred to as Lefty. I was praying in my fashion, and so he said, okay, you have to pray about it. I said, look, the man's been dead for 2 years. What difference does it make? And he explained, if you don't get rid of it, you can't ever expect to see the present because the past stands in the way. There's a huge hill blocking your view of the present. You must get rid of the past. And so I, muttered these resentful prayers of mine. And I was driving along a couple weeks after that, and I had a different thought about my father. And the thought was this: my father's an alcoholic. I knew that when I was 4 years old. I didn't know the name, but I understood the condition. I was the oldest of the 5 kids. It was my job to control his ass. And I never could. But the thought was, my father was an alcoholic, and he didn't choose to be one either. Either was a new idea for me. I had never seen it like that. I knew that I had not chosen to be an alcoholic, and as soon as that either popped into my head, a whole series of different perceptions began. I realized right then, my alcoholism was much worse than my father's. To the best of my knowledge, his alcoholism never killed anybody. Mine did. When I was 17 years old, my alcoholism killed a man who was the age I am today. It's been an interesting year for me because I have known what that 17-year-old alcoholic stole, because I've lived the life that he didn't get to. You know, I've lived the year that I stole from him. My alcoholism did. Alcoholism is the only disease I'm aware of that kills people who don't have the disease. And mine did that day. So my alcoholism was worse than his. My dad had the same job for 36 years. My wife, when she talks in Al-Anon, loves to point out that in 1 year in New York City, I had 32 jobs, you know. I mean, I wasn't stable at all, and he was. He terrorized one family. I terrorized cities. No, I'm not exaggerating. I really did. I was a professor at a university in Ohio one time in 1967, and I was the co-founder and only white member of the Black Student Union, and I was urging those kids to blow up the administration building. We closed down the entire campus and the city for 3 days. That's my alcoholism did that. You know? So it was much worse than my father's. And so I began to see my father differently. And I have come to understand that is what forgiveness is. It is not pretending it didn't happen. It is not like the governor pardoning somebody off a death row. It is me seeing it differently. And I saw my father differently as a result of that 4 through 10. And it changed my life from then to now. Absolutely, absolutely. That day, I noticed I saw a black and white, and I never wanted to either ram it or run from it. It was just a guy driving. I was no longer involved in a private war with the heat, because I forgave my father. And I became a better employee, eventually a better employer. I became a better father. And I am the best grandfather you ever met. It's amazing. It's changed all from that single roadblock to the present. I mean, sometimes we're a little vague when we say to new people that it'll get better. Let me just tell you how it got better in one way for me. June the 4th, 1971, my 4 children got together in the living room of my house up in Hollywood, West Hollywood. The oldest was 20 and the youngest was 7. And they each told me that they did not love me, want me, or need me. And they told me to get the hell out of their lives and to leave their mother alone, that I was killing her. And they had packed a suitcase for me, and they kicked me out of my house. And I walked out of that house feeling lonely, separate, different, angry, and afraid, which is the way I have felt my entire life. And I did the only thing I have ever known how to do. And when I got drunk enough, I broke into my car so I'd have a place to sleep. And the next morning I called her like a child and begged her to take me back again, and she didn't know any better, so she did. And the next night I got arrested, and that's the last arrest so far. Okay. The middle daughter was 9 years old when that happened. This past school year, her daughter, Emily, is 9 years old. and she was in 3rd grade. And she called me. And she said, you know, I'm going to write an essay. It's my first essay. I said, great. She said, you want to know what it's about? And I said, sure. She said, it's called My Special Friend, Grandpa. That's how good it can get. From there to there. There's no road map for that. There's no way to get from there to there. Life is not a problem to be solved. It's a mystery to be lived. And just doing that stuff, you know, allowing the past to eventually be the past and no longer interfere and grab my throat and twist it into rage and pain and guilt over the past. I can't see the future. I can't see the present. And the last 3, the final section, Alan McGinnis, God bless him. Alan McGinnis was the one who first caught my attention on this thing. I was in a Brentwood meeting on a Thursday night, and he was doing the workshop. He died after, I was 6 months sober when he died, so it was very early in my sobriety. But Alan, somebody asked him a question about the commonest question in any workshop, which is, how do you know God's will from yours? And he said, in the course of answering that, he got to a spot and he said, but you need to be in touch with God in the only place where God is. The only time you can ever reach God, and he made this dramatic pause, the only time you can ever reach God is now. And the now just caught my attention. Here and now is the only place God is. And it just, the last 3 steps are designed for us to stay in the now. That's what they're for. That's how they work. And so the steps, it seems to me, have this structure of the future, the past, and the present. And it works that way as we progress through them. When Alan McGinnis was 16 years sober in 1968, and he gave a lecture to the UCLA students in, I guess in alcohol counseling or something. I'm not quite sure who it was, but it is the pamphlet, A Member's Eye View of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you have not read that, or if you've not read it recently, do it again. God, it's wonderful. It really is wonderful. One of the things he mentions in there is that part of the success of Alcoholics Anonymous is that it is the way it is presented. He said, we don't have much in the way of brand new ideas. It's all culled from ancient beliefs and from religions all over the place, but the presentation is more palatable particularly to alcoholics. Because we don't say, you must do this, or the book says, this is what we did, and this is what happened. And then it's up to you, see, nobody's shaking their finger at rebellious alcoholics like me. Don't tell me what to do. I used to run red lights for drill, don't tell me what to do. But if you tell me this is what I did, and this is what happened, that's different. Then I can hear you. And I'm willing to maybe even try it, So that I just happened to read that pamphlet recently, and I just loved his insight into the function of our program, in us and between us. It's really wonderful. Because we are in possession of the two words that are the most healing words in any language. We own them. There are no therapists, psychiatrists, ministers, religious icons, gurus. Nobody has the words that we have that absolutely begin the healing process. It did for me, and I don't think there's ever been an exception. And the words that I heard from a guy, I mean, I'd been on the street for about 3 years by this time. I had not earned any money for 3 years. I used to describe myself as a functioning alcoholic. Well, but see, my definition of a functioning alcoholic was somebody that's married to somebody that does work, you know. And so she was working, God bless her, so that, you know. But it just was impossible for me to function anymore. I just could not do that. And so the streets had been where I was hanging out, and I was doing all kinds of concoctions. I mean, on a daily basis, I was just added many, many items to my recipe. And so I just didn't see how it was possible for me to continue in that endless vein. And I got to a 12-step situation up in Oxnard, and this guy, I took one look at him, and I may not know much about me, but I can read you in a flash. I need to. You got my mouth and my size, you better know when to duck and run. You know what I mean? I've been reading people for years, and so I was still alive. And I took one look at this guy, and I read him, and I was absolutely accurate. Later on, I kind of was able to check it out. I saw him instantly. I saw this guy is a 9-to-5 executive. He goes to the Cock and Bull on Sunset at 5:30 and drinks 9 martinis. I know the man. He has nothing to do with me. It's just not my style. And he sat my wife and I down up in Oxnard and began to tell us what it used to be like, what happened, and what it was like then for him. And in 10 minutes, it was clear to me that that man knew what it felt like to be me at 3 a.m. And I thought nobody knew that. It was my job in life to keep you from finding that out. I was perfectly willing to share my opinions with you, but I never wanted you to see my tears. He already knew. He already knew. And the two magic words that we have, that we own, are, me too. Me too. Been there, done that. Got the t-shirt. Me too. Had just a wonderful experience. I don't know how he is, but man, it sure was good for me. I spoke up in Santa Barbara at the convention up there last weekend, and Tim, my friend up there, brought this guy over, big muscular, obviously ex-con guy, and sat him next to at the speaker's banquet thing in Friday night, very posh restaurant, and everybody. Between me and Lou, who was the Saturday night speaker, and he said, "This is Gino. He's my brother-in-law." And I turned to Gino and I said, "Are you in the program?" He said, "Well, I want to be." And I said, how long has it been since you had a drink? And he said, "What time is it?" and he'd had a drink at 11 o'clock, and we started on him. And Sunday, at the countdown, the oldest member in that group was 49 years sober, and the youngest was Gino. Man, it was great. It was great. I don't know if he's going to last it. I don't know if he's been given the gift, but I sure got a gift to watch that, you know. He went to 6 meetings on Saturday. It was great. And I was talking, I mean, I get maybe a little crude, but you don't mind it. I was talking, and I was talking about this thing about Me Too, you know, and I said, you know, I know what it feels like to spit up blood in a hospital. And Gino turned to Tim, he was sitting next to him, and he said, I did that. This morning, I was in the hospital, and I spit up blood. And Tim said, he's talking to you, asshole. It was great. It was great. And Gino was, you know, he was crying from the minute. He was crying by the time they got to 30 days and started to count down because he knew he only had one. Who's going to beat him, you know? It was great. It was just very touching. Another thing my sponsor told me in that nasty way of his, he said, you have to be rigorously honest. I said, okay, I'll do that. He said, let me tell you what the word means. Okay, Fred, what does it mean? He said, it's when your mind, your mouth, and your behavior coincide. Oh, I'd never quite thought of it like that. My mind, my mouth, and my body had rarely been in the same room. He said, let me give you an example. You're married. Well, I'd never quite thought of it like that either. She was married. He said, you're married, and if you want to be rigorously honest, you have to be faithful. I said, why? He said, you're not being faithful to the woman. You're being faithful to the promise you made. I said, look, I have been unfaithful for the entire 17 years that we've been together, to the best of my ability, you understand? He said, that's not how it works. I said, look, I'm not even sure I love her. And he said, no, you don't. We teach that here. You do loving things where you are, and you will learn how to love. And in your case, we will begin with politeness. If she cooks, you say thank you. Can you handle that? And I said, okay. And he said, and you have to be faithful. And I said, I would. And 3 years later, I called him to complain. I said, okay. I'm doing what you tell me, and I must admit it's working. I'm still here, but she still does not trust me. And he said, well, let's figure out how long it took you to teach her not to trust you. We figured it was 17 years. So he said, fine, when you get 17 years clean and sober and faithful, then the score will be even. I said, thanks a lot. But I kept on doing it. And somewhere along the line, one of those gifts that come in AA that you couldn't predict because I didn't even know they were there, one of those came. It dawned on me somewhere along the line that in those first 17 years, I had essentially one experience with a variety of women. And in the last 26 years, 3 months and whatever it was, 13 days, I've had a variety of experiences with one woman. And I know which is better. I've been on both sides of that fence. I know which is better. This is better. We've been together now 43 years. And when I was, I was 25, I gave her a 25th wedding anniversary card. I mean, she's been married to me for 41 years, but I've been married to her for 25, you know. And Fred wasn't here to see it. He died when I was 15 and a half years sober. I always say of exhaustion. But she gave me this little medallion when I was 17. It says, 17, even. And that's true. That's true. He told me God comes to you through other people. And we teach you how to love here. I didn't start by loving my wife or my children. I started by loving drunks I was trying to help. That's what happened. It's just what happened. And I didn't even know that was happening. I was 3 years sober when I started to sponsor this one guy. His name was Raymond. Raymond was nothing but trouble. He was 19 when I got him. Oh man, he was never do what you tell him. I got him out of jails and put him into 12-step houses. I talked him down off acid trips. I mean, he was just constantly. One time he lived in Newbury Park, and one time he went there and called the police and told him there was a man with a gun in the park. Then he ran to the park and pretended to have a gun. It was going to be his form of suicide. See what I mean? They're going to gun him down. But they knew Raymond. They said, come on, Raymond, we'll take you home, you know. I once had him in a 12-step house, and he escaped. And you can go out the front door. It ain't jail. He waited till midnight and snuck out the back and jumped over a little 3-foot wall that had a 10-foot drop, and he broke his back. And then we had to take him to meetings in a body cast. And we put him in the front row and tip him up so he could see the speaker, you know. We said, get the message, Raymond. Get the goddamn message. Raymond didn't get the message. He just did 4 years of that. And one day I had him down a little flea bag motel on Figueroa, and I went to pick him up, and he wasn't out in front. Leave it to Raymond. So I had to park the car. I now had a car. And I went upstairs and pushed open the door, and Raymond was lying there on the bed with pills still undissolved in his mouth and an empty bottle clutched in his hand. Raymond was dead, and he was 23. And I stood by his bed and knew that I loved him. I loved that kid for nothing. I didn't want anything from Raymond. I just wanted him to know what it felt like not to have to drink anymore. That's all I ever wanted for Raymond. And I knew I loved him. It's the first time that it got clear to me that I actually love. And I'm pretty good at it these days. I love some very unlovable folks. I really do, and I have for a long time. I had a real tough August. I buried 4 people. One of them called me sponsor for 25 years. He never was given the gift of sobriety. He was a darling guy, a charming man. His name was Bill Pollock. Delightful guy. He just couldn't stay sober. And he died an alcoholic death. He died in the Brevoort Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard. He was dead 4 days before anybody knew it. That's alcoholic death. You know, and it's just the way this is. This is an absolutely terminal disease, and it kills almost everybody that gets it. Almost everybody that get it. So those of us who have been given this reprieve should treasure it with all we've got and give it away with both hands. It is desperately important for us as well as for the people we're trying to give it to, you know. Fred told me God comes to you through other people. This was given to me. I'll give it to you and sit down. I seek the light. God is not out there trying to get in. God is in here trying to get out. I will choose faith rather than doubt. And yet sometimes it isn't at all clear. Why must pain be? Disappointment, a child betrayed. Why must light be so distant and rage so near? Why must each one, adult and child, you and I, always be afraid? But I diligently seek the light in you. The smile from your last bed, the tenderness that often accompanies age, an unasked kindness, a fatherly hand on a tousled head. Light reflects. It pushes back the dark and somehow opens up the cage. Thank you.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.